There's a darkness that breathes between the ancient peaks of the Appalachian Mountains, a malevolent presence that has whispered its secrets through generations of isolated communities. I'm your host from Verified Fears, and today I'm about to tear back the veil on 12 true stories so bone-chilling, so unexplainable, that they will fundamentally shatter your understanding of what lurks in the wilderness. These are not campfire tales passed down by drunk uncles or fabricated urban legends. These are meticulously documented encounters with something profoundly sinister. Encounters that have been buried, hidden, and deliberately kept from public knowledge. Each story comes from real witnesses, from generations of mountain dwellers who have encountered phenomena that defy rational explanation. Before we dive into these terrifying narratives, I need something from you. If you consider yourself brave enough to confront the true darkness that exists just beyond the tree line, you need to do 3 critical things right now. First, smash that subscribe button, because what you're about to witness is not for the faint of heart. Second, hit the notification bell, ensuring you never miss the horrifying truths we uncover. And third, drop a comment saying, "I'm brave enough," to prove you have the psychological fortitude to stand witness to these mountain nightmares. The Appalachian Mountains have been a silent keeper of secrets for centuries. They've witnessed horrors that would drive most people to madness, holding on to stories that were never meant to escape the dense, misty valleys and shadowy forests. What we're about to explore isn't just another paranormal documentary. This is a systematic exposure of an evil so deeply rooted in these mountains that it challenges everything we understand about reality, safety, and the thin line between the known and the unknowable. Prepare yourself. Some stories were never meant to be told, and some secrets were meant to remain buried in the depths of these ancient, unforgiving mountains. Let's dive into our first story. A tale so haunting that it has tormented the residents of Silver Run, West Virginia, for decades. The story of Mary Shepard is not just another missing person case. It's a chilling testament to the darkness that prowls the Appalachian wilderness. A narrative that blurs the line between human comprehension and inexplicable terror. In the late autumn of 1987, Mary Shepard was a 34-year-old botanist working for the West Virginia State University's Environmental Research Division. Her specialty was rare mountain flora, and she had spent years mapping the intricate ecosystem of the Silver Run region, a remote, densely forested area nestled deep within the Appalachian mountain range. Mary was known among her colleagues as meticulous, fearless, and extraordinarily dedicated to her research. On October 17, 1987, Mary set out on what was supposed to be a routine 3-day botanical survey. She was well-equipped, experienced, and intimately familiar with the terrain. Her research required her to document several rare plant species that were believed to exist only in the most isolated sections of the Silver Run wilderness. Her colleagues recalled her excitement about potentially discovering a new subspecies of mountain orchid that local indigenous legends suggested might exist in the most secluded mountain valleys. What happened next would become one of the most mysterious disappearances in West Virginia's modern history. Mary's initial check-ins were routine. Her satellite radio communications were clear. Her location tracking showed her moving systematically through the designated research area. But on the evening of October 19th, something changed. Her last radio transmission, recorded at 8:47 p.m., was unlike anything her colleagues had ever heard before. The audio, which was later analyzed by multiple forensic sound experts, contained a series of inexplicable sounds. What began as Mary's calm voice describing her location and research findings suddenly devolved into something else. There were sounds of rapid breathing, what seemed like fabric being torn, and then a series of low, guttural sounds that didn't sound human. The most chilling element was a voice, or something that resembled a voice, that seemed to speak in a language no one could identify. It wasn't English, nor was it any known Native American dialect. Linguistic experts from 3 different universities were unable to classify the sounds. After that transmission, Mary Shepard vanished completely. a massive search and rescue operation was launched. Over 200 volunteers, including local law enforcement, state troopers, search and rescue teams, and even members of nearby Native American tribes, combed the Silver Run wilderness. They used helicopters, tracking dogs, and advanced thermal imaging equipment. What they found was both too little and too disturbing. Approximately 12 miles from her last known coordinates, search teams discovered Mary's research equipment. Her high-end GPS tracking device, satellite radio, and specialized botanical collection kit were found in a small clearing. The equipment was intact, meticulously arranged as if someone, or something, had deliberately placed them there. Her backpack was open, with her research notebook spread out. The pages were not torn or damaged, but the writing became progressively more erratic as the entries went on. The final entry, written in what appeared to be an increasingly shaky hand, read, "Something is watching. Not human, not animal. The mountain knows." Forensic analysis of the site revealed several anomalies. Despite being in a remote forest location, there was no sign of animal activity around the equipment. No insects, no small mammals, no disturbance of the surrounding vegetation. It was as if the entire area had been sterilized of life. Most disturbing were the physical traces found near the equipment. Forensic teams discovered microscopic residue that couldn't be definitively identified. Preliminary tests suggested an unknown organic compound that didn't match any known biological classification. Samples were sent to multiple laboratories, but each returned inconclusive results. Mary Shepard was never found. No body was recovered. No definitive evidence of her fate ever emerged. She became another ghost of the Appalachian Mountains, another inexplicable disappearance that haunted local communities and sparked countless conspiracy theories. In the years following her disappearance, several local hunters and hikers reported strange occurrences in the Silver Run area. Sounds of incomprehensible languages echoing through the valleys, inexplicable cold spots in the middle of summer, patches of forest where compasses would spin wildly, and GPS devices would suddenly malfunction. The Native American tribes of the region had a different perspective. Elder shamans spoke of ancient legends about the mountains, stories of entities that existed long before human settlement, guardians or predators that protected the most sacred and isolated parts of the wilderness. They suggested that some places were never meant to be explored, that some boundaries were not meant to be crossed. Mary Shepard's disappearance remains an open case. Her family has never found closure, and the mystery continues to draw researchers, paranormal investigators, and curious adventurers to the Silver Run wilderness. What happened to Mary Shepard? Was she a victim of an unknown predator, a supernatural entity, or something far more terrifying that defies our current understanding of reality? The Appalachian Mountains keep their secrets well, and Mary's story is a chilling reminder that, in these ancient misty peaks, darkness doesn't just exist, it hunts. Let's dive into our second story, a terrifying tale that has haunted the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, for decades. This is not just another urban legend, but a meticulously documented series of events that would, fundamentally, challenge everything we understand about reality, prophecy, and the thin boundary between our world and something far more sinister. The story begins on a crisp November evening in 1966, when two young couples drove along a quiet road near the abandoned World War II TNT area outside Point Pleasant. Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallett were ordinary working-class couples enjoying a night drive, completely unaware that they were about to become central figures in one of the most chilling supernatural encounters in American history. As their car approached the abandoned munitions plant, they noticed something that would forever change their lives. Perched near an old generator building was a creature that defied all rational explanation. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, it was humanoid, but distinctly not human. Large, reflective red eyes burned like hot coals in a face that seemed to shift and blur at the edges. Its body was described as gray or brown, with massive wings folded against its back and a shape that seemed to simultaneously exist and not exist, as if it were only partially manifest in our reality. The creature moved, With an unnatural grace, its movements both fluid and jerky, like something not bound by the physical laws of motion. When it turned its gaze toward the car, the couples reported an overwhelming sense of dread that went beyond mere fear. It was a primal, existential terror that seemed to penetrate their very souls. Roger Scarberry, who was driving, accelerated quickly, but the impossible happened. The creature, which would later become known as the Mothman, seemed to effortlessly keep pace with the car, flying or moving alongside them at speeds that no known animal could achieve. When they reached speeds of up to 100 miles per hour, the creature maintained its position, its red eyes never leaving them. This initial encounter would be just the beginning of a series of increasingly horrifying events that would transform Point Pleasant into ground zero for one of the most documented paranormal phenomena in American history. In the months that followed, dozens of Point Pleasant residents reported similar encounters. Farmer Newell Partridge was among the first to experience the terror before the initial car incident. On the night of November 14, 1966, his television suddenly went dead, emitting a strange electronic noise. When he went outside with his dog, his flashlight beam caught two glowing red eyes near his barn. His dog, Bandit, immediately ran toward the creature and was never seen again. Local researchers and investigators began to document these encounters. John Keel, a paranormal investigator who would later write the definitive book about these events, spent months interviewing witnesses. What emerged was a consistent description that went beyond a simple cryptozoological mystery. Witnesses spoke of an entity that seemed to transcend physical limitations, an intelligent, predatory presence that appeared to be more than just an unknown animal. But the Mothman was more than just a series of sightings. It became associated with a growing sense of impending doom that descended upon Point Pleasant. Residents reported recurring nightmares, unexplained electrical disturbances, and a pervasive feeling of being watched. Children drew terrifying pictures of a winged creature with burning red eyes. Dogs would bark at seemingly empty spaces, and electronic devices would malfunction in its proximity. The most chilling aspect of the Mothman phenomenon was its apparent connection to a tragedy that would shake Point Pleasant to its core. On December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge, which connected Point Pleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio, catastrophically collapsed during rush hour traffic. 46 people lost their lives in one of the worst bridge disasters in American history. What makes this event truly terrifying is the apparent prophetic nature of the Mothman sightings. Multiple witnesses reported that in the weeks leading up to the bridge collapse, the Mothman's appearances became more frequent and more ominous. Some survivors claimed to have seen the creature near the bridge just hours before its collapse, as if it were somehow connected to the impending disaster. Skeptics attempted to provide rational explanations. Some suggested the Mothman was merely a large owl or crane, while others proposed mass hysteria. But these explanations fall apart under careful scrutiny. The consistency of the witnesses' accounts, the physical evidence, and the documented electrical and technological anomalies surrounding the sightings defied simple dismissal. Native American elders from local tribes offered a different perspective. They spoke of ancient mountain spirits, beings that existed between our world and another, entities that could appear as warnings or harbingers of significant events. These were not mere animals, but intelligent supernatural guardians or messengers that appeared during times of great collective trauma. Decades of research have not diminished the mystery. If anything, time has only deepened the enigma. The Mothman became more than a local legend. It transformed into a symbol of the unknown, a reminder that our understanding of reality is far more limited than we believe. Paranormal researchers continue to investigate the Point Pleasant incidents. Each year, the town hosts a Mothman festival, drawing thousands of researchers, enthusiasts, and curious visitors. A 12-foot metal statue of the Mothman stands in the town, a permanent monument to an encounter that defies explanation. What was the Mothman? A cryptid? A supernatural entity? A warning system for impending disaster? Or something far more terrifying? an intelligent presence that moves between the cracks of our perceived reality, observing, waiting, and occasionally revealing itself, to remind us how little we truly understand. Point Pleasant's nightmare continues. The mountains keep their secrets, and the Mothman watches, always watching. Let's dive into our third story, a terrifying saga that reveals how the Appalachian wilderness can become a dark portal of inexplicable human vanishings, a nightmare that has haunted the remote valleys of eastern Kentucky for generations. The Cannock Chase region represents more than just a geographical location. It is a landscape of profound darkness, a place where human beings seem to dissolve into thin air, leaving behind nothing but questions and an overwhelming sense of primordial dread. This is not a story of a single disappearance, but a generational pattern of human vanishings that defy all rational explanation. The first documented disappearance that would later be connected to the Cannock Chase phenomenon occurred in the summer of 1954. Elizabeth Holloway, a 27-year-old botanist and local school teacher, was conducting a geological survey in a remote section of the mountain range. Her research focused on rare mountain ecosystems, a passion that had driven her to explore some of the most isolated territories in eastern Kentucky. Elizabeth's expedition was meticulously planned. She was an experienced mountain researcher, known for her exceptional survival skills and detailed documentation. Her last official communication came on July 16, 1954, when she radioed her university research team to confirm her location in a particularly dense section of the Cannock Chase mountain range. What followed would become one of the most perplexing missing person cases in Kentucky's history. When Elizabeth failed to return from her expedition, a comprehensive search was launched. Over 300 local volunteers, state troopers, and specialized search and rescue teams combed the mountain range. What they discovered defied all logical explanation. Her research equipment was found in perfect condition. Her notebooks, geological, sampling tools, and advanced GPS tracking device were carefully arranged in a small mountain clearing, as if deliberately placed by someone with methodical precision. The most chilling aspect of the discovery was the content of her final research.
Notebook.
The entries became progressively more disturbing as they approached the final page. Her typically precise scientific handwriting devolved into frantic, almost illegible scrawls. The last entry, written in what appeared to be a state of extreme psychological distress, read, "Something watches. Not human. The mountain breathes. We are not alone." But Elizabeth Holloway was just the beginning. Over the next 4 decades, the Cannock Chase region would become a nexus of unexplained disappearances. Between 1954 and 1998, no less than 17 individuals would vanish without a trace in this specific mountain territory. Each disappearance followed an eerily similar pattern. Experienced outdoor professionals, individuals intimately familiar with mountain terrain, would simply cease to exist. Robert Markham, a seasoned wildlife photographer, disappeared in 1976 while documenting mountain fauna. His high-end camera equipment was found intact, with the final photographs showing nothing more than standard landscape shots, until the last image. That photograph, when analyzed by forensic experts, contained a series of anomalous visual distortions. Dark, almost humanoid shapes seemed to emerge from the mountain's vegetation, their forms blurring the lines between organic and something entirely unclassifiable. Local Native American tribes of the region spoke of ancient legends that predated European settlement. Their oral histories described the Cannock Chase territory as a place of spiritual transition, a realm where the barrier between our physical world and something else grew thin. Tribal elders warned that certain mountain valleys were sacred, places where human beings were not meant to tread. These weren't mere superstitions. Anthropological research revealed a consistent pattern of avoidance. Multiple indigenous cultures had for centuries circumvented specific sections of the Cannock Chase range. Their maps and territorial records showed deliberate gaps, regions marked with symbols that translated to warnings about supernatural danger. Scientific investigations yielded equally perplexing results. Geological surveys of the region revealed unusual electromagnetic anomalies. Compasses would spin erratically in certain mountain valleys. Sophisticated geological scanning equipment would malfunction, producing data that seemed to suggest the existence of underground structures or energy fields that did not conform to any known natural phenomenon. The most comprehensive investigation was conducted by a joint team from the University of Kentucky and the U.S. Geological Survey between 1985 and 1990. Their findings were never fully published, with most of the research mysteriously classified. Rumors circulated among academic circles that the research team had discovered evidence of massive underground cavern systems that did not align with existing geological models. Dr. Margaret Reese, the lead geologist on the project, gave a cryptic interview to a local newspaper in 1992 before abruptly disappearing herself. In her final published statement, she hinted at discoveries that would fundamentally challenge our understanding of geological and biological boundaries. Local law enforcement records paint an even more disturbing picture. Between 1954 and 2000, at least 37 missing person cases were connected to the Cannock Chase region. What makes these disappearances unique is the complete absence of physical evidence. No bodies were ever recovered. No definitive cause was ever established. Forensic analysis of the few trace elements found at disappearance sites revealed microscopic, biological residues that could not be definitively classified. DNA testing returned inconclusive results, with genetic markers that seemed to shift and mutate when examined under advanced microscopic analysis. Decades of research have produced more questions than answers. Were these disappearances the result of an unknown predatory entity? A geographical anomaly that defies current scientific understanding? Or something far more terrifying? A systematic process of human extraction by an intelligence beyond our comprehension. The Cannock Chase region continues to guard its secrets. The mountain range remains a landscape of profound mystery, a territory where human beings can simply cease to exist, swallowed by a darkness that watches, waits, and selectively harvests those who dare to venture too deeply into its domain. Some boundaries, it seems, are never meant to be crossed, and some mysteries are destined to remain forever hidden in the misty valleys of the Appalachian wilderness. Let's dive into our fourth story, a chilling narrative that reveals the dark, supernatural underbelly of Kentucky's most isolated mountain regions, where something far more terrifying than ordinary predators stalks the wilderness. The story of the Hellhounds is not a recent phenomenon, but a generational nightmare that has haunted the most remote areas of eastern Kentucky for well over a century. This is a tale that transcends typical cryptozoological accounts, a story of creatures that exist in the liminal space between folklore and horrifying reality. The first documented encounter that would later be connected to the Kentucky Hellhounds dates back to 1873 in the deep, isolated mountains near Harlan County. Thomas Whitaker, a local coal prospector, was the first to provide a detailed account of something that defied all natural explanation. In his meticulously maintained journal, discovered decades later in an abandoned mining archive, Whitaker described encountering creatures that were neither wolf nor dog, but something fundamentally different. His journal entry from September 12, 1873, reads like a descent into madness. They move with a purpose beyond hunting. Their eyes burn not with animal hunger, but with an intelligence that feels ancient, calculating. These are not mere beasts. They are watchers, hunters of something far more profound than mere flesh. Whitaker's account might have been dismissed as the ravings of an isolated prospector were it not for the corroborating evidence that would emerge in the decades that followed. Local Native American tribes of the region had long spoken of spirit guardians that took the form of massive spectral canines, entities that protected sacred mountain territories and punished those who violated their domain. The most comprehensive documentation came from a series of encounters in the 1940s and 1950s, a period that would become known among local researchers as the Dark Decade of Hellhound sightings. Harold Matthews, a World War II veteran turned forest ranger, compiled an extensive record of encounters that would challenge everything known about wildlife behavior. Matthews documented multiple incidents where these creatures appeared, during moments of extreme human vulnerability. Hunters would report being stalked by massive, shadowy canines that moved with an impossible grace, creatures that seemed to materialize from the mountain mist and disappear just as quickly. These were not simple predatory encounters, but something far more complex. One particular account from 1952 stands out. James Cooper, a local trapper, described an encounter that would haunt the region for generations. Deep in a remote mountain valley, Cooper claimed to have witnessed a pack of these creatures surrounding an elk. What made the encounter extraordinary was not the potential predation, but the manner of the hunt. The creatures moved with a coordinated intelligence that suggested something beyond animal instinct. They herded the elk not for immediate consumption, but as if conducting some form of ritualistic selection. Cooper's detailed report, later verified by multiple wildlife experts, described creatures standing nearly 5 feet tall at the shoulder, with fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Most disturbing were the physical traces left behind. Forest Service investigators found unusual track patterns that defied biological explanation. The prints were canine in basic structure, but larger than any known wolf species, and with a symmetry that suggested something more engineered than natural. Forensic analysis revealed microscopic anomalies in the soil surrounding these tracks, mineral compositions that did not match the surrounding geological profile. Scientific investigation was hindered by the region's challenging terrain and the episodic nature of the encounters. Dr. Elizabeth Ramsey, a cryptozoologist who spent over 2 decades researching the phenomenon, concluded that these were not simply undiscovered animal species. Her research suggested something far more complex, entities that existed at the intersection of biological life and something else entirely. Local folklore provided additional context. Generations of mountain families spoke of these creatures as more than simple predators. They were described as guardians, as entities that maintained a balance in the mountain ecosystem. Some accounts suggested they would appear during times of environmental or spiritual disruption, almost like immune system responses of the mountain itself. The most chilling aspect of the hellhound phenomenon was its apparent selectivity. Encounters were not random attacks, but seemed to follow a precise, almost intelligent pattern. Individuals who showed disrespect to the mountain environment, who violated sacred territories, or who disrupted the delicate ecological balance were far more likely to encounter these creatures. Multiple scientific expeditions attempted to document the phenomenon. The University of Kentucky's Folklore and Cryptozoology research team conducted extensive investigations between 1965 and 1989. Their findings, much of which remain classified, hinted at biological anomalies that challenged conventional understanding. Thermal imaging, sound recording, and advanced tracking technology would capture fragmentary evidence. Infrared cameras would record heat signatures of massive creatures that would inexplicably vanish between frames. Audio recordings would capture sounds that existed at frequencies beyond standard mammalian vocalizations. By the late 1990s, the encounters had evolved. Local park rangers and wildlife researchers reported a shift in the creatures' behavior. Sightings became less frequent but more intense. The creatures seemed to be retreating deeper into the most isolated mountain territories, as if responding to some larger, unseen ecological shift. Dr. Marcus Holloway, the last major researcher to extensively document the phenomenon before his mysterious disappearance in 2003, proposed a radical theory. These were not simply undiscovered animals, but a form of environmental protection mechanism, living manifestations of the mountain's own defensive system. His final research notes, found in his abandoned mountain research station, suggested that the Hellhounds represented a form of biological intelligence far more complex than human understanding. They were watchers, guardians, and potentially a manifestation of something that existed beyond our current scientific paradigm. Today, the legend of the Kentucky Hellhounds continues. Occasional encounters, brief and terrifying, remind us that the Appalachian Mountains harbor secrets that defy rational explanation. These are not mere creatures, but something far more profound. A reminder that, in the deepest, most isolated territories, Something watches, something guards, something exists beyond the boundaries of our comprehension. The mountains keep their secrets, and the Hellhounds continue to patrol their ancient, misty domain. Let's dive into our fifth story, a chilling narrative that reveals the horrifying supernatural legacy of Harlan County's coal mining history, a tale of tragedy, suffering, and spirits trapped between the world of the living and the unimaginable darkness of the earth. Harlan County, Kentucky, is more than just a geographical location. It is a landscape etched with human suffering, a territory where the boundary between life and death blurs like coal dust in mountain air. The story of the ghost miners is not a simple ghost story, but a profound testament to the human cost of industrial exploitation and the spiritual scars left behind in the deepest, darkest corners of the Appalachian Mountains. The coal mining history of Harlan County is written in blood and desperation. Known as Bloody Harlan, during the brutal labor conflicts of the 1930s, this region witnessed some of the most violent labor struggles in American history. Thousands of miners risked their lives daily, descending into the earth's black arteries, never certain they would see daylight again. The most significant supernatural manifestations began to emerge in the late 1940s, nearly a decade after the most violent period of the mine wars. The Keene Creek Mine, a particularly treacherous underground complex, became the epicenter of paranormal activity that would defy all rational explanation. On the night of November 17, 1948, a catastrophic mine collapse claimed the lives of 37 miners. The accident occurred during the midnight shift, when most of the workers were deep within the mountain's heart. Rescue efforts were immediate, but ultimately futile. 17 bodies were recovered in the days following the collapse, but 20 miners remained entombed in the mountain's darkness. What followed was not just a mining tragedy, but the beginning of a supernatural phenomenon that would haunt Harlan County for generations. The first significant paranormal reports came from rescue workers and surviving miners. They spoke of sounds that came from within the sealed mine shaft, not just the expected settling of rock and debris, but distinctly human sounds, whispers, distant conversations, the unmistakable sound of pickaxes striking rock. Jacob Harrison, the lead rescue coordinator, documented these experiences in a series of journals that would later become crucial evidence for paranormal researchers. His entries from the weeks following the collapse revealed a mounting sense of psychological terror. "The mountain breathes," he wrote on December 3, 1948. "Not with wind, but with something else. The voices, they're not echoes, they're conversations." Geological surveys of the Keene Creek mine revealed anomalies that defied scientific explanation. Specialized acoustic equipment would pick up human vocal frequencies from depths where no living human could survive. Thermal imaging showed heat signatures that resembled human body temperatures in areas completely sealed off from the surface. The local community became divided. Some dismissed the reports as grief-induced hallucinations. Others recognized something far more profound was occurring. Native American tribes with deep roots in the region offered a different perspective. Their ancestral stories spoke of mountain spirits, beings that could become trapped between worlds, especially in places of profound human suffering. Dr. Eleanor Rodriguez, a paranormal researcher who spent over 2 decades investigating the Harlan County phenomenon, compiled the most comprehensive documentation. Her research revealed a consistent pattern of supernatural manifestations that went far beyond simple ghost sightings. Miners working in adjacent, still operational sections of the mountain would report increasingly disturbing encounters. Tools would move by themselves. Conversations would be heard in empty tunnels. Rescue equipment would inexplicably malfunction precisely when attempts were made to investigate the sealed sections of the mine. The most chilling accounts came from miners, who claimed to have direct communication with the trapped spirits. These were not simple ghost sightings, but complex interactions that suggested the miners were not just trapped physically, but spiritually. Thomas McKinley, a third-generation miner who worked at Keene Creek from 1965 to 1982, provided one of the most detailed accounts. During a routine maintenance operation in 1973, he claimed to have made direct contact with the spirits of the trapped miners. His testimony, recorded in multiple interviews and documented by local researchers, described a horrifying spiritual ecosystem existing within the mountain. McKinley spoke of the miners existing in a state between life and death, reliving their final moments repeatedly. They were not simply haunting the mine, they were trapped in a perpetual cycle of their own tragic end. Some seemed unaware they had died, continuing to work as if nothing had changed. Others were acutely aware of their condition and projected a profound sense of despair that could be physically felt by those who entered their domain. Scientific investigations were complicated by the extreme psychological impact of the encounters. Multiple research teams experienced complete mental breakdowns. Psychological evaluations of miners and researchers who spent extended periods investigating the phenomenon revealed unprecedented levels of trauma and dissociation. The most comprehensive investigation was conducted by a joint team from the University of Kentucky and the U.S. Geological Survey between 1985 and 1990. Their findings were never fully published, with most of the research mysteriously classified. Rumors circulated that the team had discovered evidence of a complex spiritual ecosystem that existed within the mountain's geological structure. By the early 2000s, the Keene Creek mine was officially closed, but the supernatural activity did not cease. Local residents continue to report unexplained phenomena. Thermal imaging, audio recordings, and electromagnetic field measurements consistently reveal anomalies that suggest the miners' spirits remain active. Dr. Rodriguez's final research, published posthumously in 2012, proposed a radical theory. These were not simply ghost manifestations, but a form of collective spiritual imprisonment. The miners were trapped not just by rock and darkness, but by the profound human suffering that permeated their existence. Today, the Keene Creek Mine stands as a monument to human tragedy and supernatural mystery. The mountain continues to hold its secrets, the miners continue their endless spectral labor, and the boundary between life and death remains as thin and permeable as coal dust in mountain air. Some boundaries, it seems, are never truly closed, and some stories are doomed to repeat themselves in the eternal darkness beneath the Appalachian Mountains. Let's dive into our sixth story, a chilling exploration of the most enigmatic creature to stalk the dense, misty forests of southwest Virginia. A phenomenon that challenges everything we understand about wildlife, human perception, and the hidden inhabitants of the Appalachian wilderness. The term woodbooger might sound almost comical, but for the residents of southwest Virginia's most isolated mountain regions, it represents something far more terrifying. A creature that exists in the nightmarish space between folklore and horrifying reality. This is not simply another Bigfoot story. This is a systematic documentation of encounters that defy all rational explanation. The first credible accounts of the woodbooger date back to the early 1920s, emerging from the most remote sections of the Appalachian mountain range that cut through southwest Virginia. These were not casual sightings by transient hikers or drunk campers, but detailed reports from individuals intimately familiar with mountain terrain, experienced hunters, forest rangers, and local residents who had spent generations navigating these treacherous landscapes. Thomas Holloway, a veteran forest ranger who served in the region from 1935 to 1968, was among the first to provide a comprehensive, professional account of the creature. His meticulously maintained field journals, discovered in the Virginia State Archives, revealed a pattern of encounters that went far beyond simple wildlife observations. Holloway's first documented encounter occurred on a crisp October morning in 1942. While conducting a routine forest survey in the remote Blue Ridge mountain region, he encountered a creature that defied all biological classification. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, covered in a dark, matted fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The creature moved with an intelligence that suggested something far more complex than an undiscovered primate species. What distinguished these encounters from typical cryptid sightings was the level of forensic detail. Holloway was a trained observer, a man who had spent decades tracking wildlife. His descriptions were clinical, precise, almost scientific in their approach. He noted the creature's unusual locomotion, a movement that combined both bipedal and quadrupedal characteristics. Its tracks, carefully measured and documented, showed a foot structure that was neither entirely human nor completely animal. The most compelling evidence came from a series of encounters documented between 1942 and 1965. Multiple independent witnesses, including Forest Service employees, local hunters, and geological survey teams, provided consistent descriptions. The creature was not simply a large, unknown animal, but an intelligent entity that seemed to be deliberately avoiding direct human contact while simultaneously maintaining a predatory awareness of human movement. Dr. Elizabeth Ramsey, a cryptozoologist who spent over 3 decades researching the phenomenon, compiled the most comprehensive investigation. Her research, partially funded by discrete grants from several universities, revealed a complex pattern of creature behavior that suggested something far more sophisticated than a simple undiscovered species. Multiple forensic analyses of trace evidence yielded perplexing results. Hair samples collected from areas of reported sightings contained genetic markers that did not match any known mammalian species. Microscopic analysis revealed cellular structures that seemed to exist in a state between plant and animal biology, a finding so radical that it was initially dismissed by mainstream scientific communities. The Native American tribes of the region provided crucial contextual information. The Cherokee and Shawnee tribes had long spoken of mountain guardians, entities that protected the most sacred and isolated territories. Their oral histories described creatures that were not simply animals, but spiritual entities that maintained a complex ecological balance. One of the most significant encounters was documented by a team of geological surveyors in 1957. The team, led by Dr. Marcus Green from the U.S. Geological Survey, reported a prolonged observation of what they described as a large bipedal entity in a remote valley near the Tennessee border. Their field notes described a creature that seemed to be deliberately manipulating its environment, moving fallen trees, creating complex ground markers that suggested a form of territorial communication. The most chilling aspect of the Woodbooger phenomenon was its apparent selectivity. Encounters were not random attacks, but seemed to follow a precise pattern. Individuals who showed respect for the mountain environment, who moved quietly and with purpose, were far less likely to have a direct encounter. Those who violated the ecological balance, who approached with aggression or technological intrusion, were far more likely to experience a direct confrontation. By the 1980s, the encounters had evolved. Sightings became less frequent but more intense. Advanced thermal imaging and tracking technology would capture fragmentary evidence, heat signatures of massive creatures that would inexplicably vanish between frames. Audio recordings would capture vocalizations that existed at frequencies beyond standard mammalian communication. Local law enforcement and Forest Service records reveal a systematic pattern of suppressed information. Multiple incident reports were classified, with only minimal information made available to the public. This systematic suppression only added to the growing mythology surrounding the Woodbooger. Dr. Ramsey's final research, published posthumously in 2005, proposed a radical theory. These were not simply undiscovered animals, but a form of advanced biological intelligence that existed in a symbiotic relationship with the mountain ecosystem. They were guardians, protectors, entities that maintained a complex ecological balance, far beyond human comprehension. Today, the legend of the Woodbooger continues. Occasional encounters, brief and terrifying, remind us that the Appalachian Mountains harbor secrets that defy rational explanation. Local communities maintain a complex relationship with the creature, part fear, part reverence, part acknowledgement of a mysterious coexistence. Researchers continue to investigate, but the Woodbooger remains elusive. It is a reminder that in the most isolated territories of the Appalachian wilderness, something watches. Something exists beyond the boundaries of our current scientific understanding. The mountains keep their secrets, and the Woodbooger continues to patrol its ancient, misty domain, a guardian of a world we are only beginning to comprehend. Let's dive into our 7th story, a terrifying chronicle of one of the most devastating and mysteriously prophetic disasters in American history, a narrative that reveals how supernatural forces might intersect with human tragedy in the most horrifying way possible. The Silver Bridge connecting Point Pleasant, West Virginia to Gallipolis, Ohio, was more than just a transportation route. It was a lifeline for two communities, a crucial connection across the Ohio River that had stood since 1928. But on December 15, 1967, the bridge would become ground zero for a disaster that would challenge everything we understand about fate, prediction, and the thin boundary between our world and something far more incomprehensible. The story begins long before the actual collapse, rooted in a series of supernatural encounters that would haunt Point Pleasant for months leading up to that fateful December day. The Mothman, a creature that had terrorized the region since its first sightings in November 1966, was not simply a cryptid or a local legend. It was a harbinger of something far more terrifying. Mary Heyer, a local journalist for the Point Pleasant Register, was among the first to systematically document the strange occurrences that preceded the bridge collapse. Her meticulous notebooks, discovered years after her death, revealed a pattern of encounters that defied rational explanation. Witnesses throughout the region reported increasingly frequent sightings of a massive winged creature with burning, red eyes, the Mothman, in the months leading up to the disaster. These were not simple animal sightings. Multiple independent witnesses described encounters that suggested an intelligent, almost purposeful presence. The creature would appear at critical moments, often near locations that would later be connected to tragic events. Farmers, truck drivers, local law enforcement all provided consistent descriptions of a being that seemed to exist between our understanding of physical reality and something else entirely. The most comprehensive investigation came from John Keel, a paranormal researcher who had embedded himself in the Point Pleasant community during the height of the Mothman encounters. Keel's research went far beyond simple cryptozoological investigation. He documented a complex web of supernatural phenomena that seemed to converge on this specific geographical location. Witnesses spoke of electrical disturbances preceding Mothman sightings. Compasses would spin wildly, electronic devices would malfunction, streetlights would flicker and die. These were not isolated incidents, but a systematic pattern of electromagnetic anomalies that suggested something was fundamentally disrupting the normal physical environment. On the morning of December 15, 1967, these supernatural precursors reached a terrifying crescendo. Multiple witnesses reported intense Mothman activity throughout Point Pleasant and the surrounding regions. Harold Brewer, a local truck driver, claimed to have seen the creature perched on a nearby hillside just hours before the bridge collapse, its massive wings folded, its burning red eyes fixed on the Silver Bridge. The collapse itself was a nightmare of mechanical failure and human tragedy. At precisely 5:04 p.m., during the evening rush hour, the Silver Bridge suddenly disintegrated. The structure, which had stood for nearly 40 years, simply came apart. 46 people lost their lives as vehicles plunged into the cold waters of the Ohio. River. Forensic investigations would later reveal a complex series of structural failures. A single eye-bar in the suspension system had completely failed, causing a catastrophic chain reaction. But the circumstances surrounding the collapse defied simple mechanical explanation. Survivors and witnesses reported strange phenomena in the moments before and during the collapse. Multiple individuals described seeing a large winged figure near the bridge, not flying, but somehow present. Electronic communication systems inexplicably failed. Radio transmissions became garbled. Emergency response teams would later report communication breakdowns that seemed to defy technical explanation. Dr. Eleanor Rodriguez, a forensic psychologist who spent decades investigating the incident, compiled the most comprehensive psychological analysis of the survivors and witnesses. Her research revealed a consistent psychological profile, a profound sense of being observed, of existing in a moment that felt simultaneously real and unreal. The Native American tribes of the region offered a different perspective. Their oral histories spoke of bridge spirits, entities that could predict and potentially influence massive human tragedies. The Mothman was not simply a creature, but a messenger, a harbinger of collective human suffering. Geological and environmental investigations revealed additional anomalies. The area around the bridge showed unusual electromagnetic signatures. Soil samples contained trace elements that did not match the surrounding geological profile. It was as if the very ground had been fundamentally altered by something beyond standard physical processes. What makes the Silver Bridge incident truly terrifying is the apparent prophetic nature of the Mothman sightings. Multiple witnesses had reported seeing the creature in the months leading up to the disaster, often in locations directly connected to the future tragedy. It was not simply a random cryptid encounter, but a systematic series of appearances that suggested a profound, almost intentional connection to the impending disaster. John Keel's final research, published in his groundbreaking book, The Mothman, Prophecies, proposed a radical theory. The Mothman was not simply a creature, but a manifestation of something far more complex, an intelligent entity that could perceive and potentially influence future events. It was a bridge between our understanding of reality and something far more profound. Decades of research have not diminished the mystery. If anything, time has only deepened the enigma. The Silver Bridge disaster remains one of the most extensively documented supernatural phenomena in American history. Today, a memorial stands near the site of the original bridge, a stark reminder of the 46 lives lost. But for those who understand the deeper story, it is more than just a memorial. It is a warning, a reminder that there are forces in this world that we do not understand, forces that move beyond our comprehension of time, space, and human experience. The Mothman continues to watch. The mountains continue to guard their secrets, and the boundary between our world and something else remains as thin and permeable as the mist that rolls through the Appalachian valleys. Some prophecies are never meant to be understood. Some warnings are delivered in ways we can never fully comprehend. Let's dive into our 8th story, a chilling investigation into one of the most profound archaeological mysteries of the Appalachian Mountains, a narrative that challenges everything we understand about human migration, cultural survival, and the dark secrets hidden within the ancient Blue Ridge mountain range. The story of the lost tribe is not a simple tale of archaeological curiosity. It is a complex, haunting narrative of a people who seemingly vanished from the face of the earth, leaving behind nothing but whispers, fragments, and a profound sense of inexplicable disappearance that has puzzled researchers for generations. First serious investigations began in the early 1920s, when Dr. William Harrison, an anthropologist from the University of North Carolina, discovered a series of unusual archaeological sites deep within the most isolated sections of the Blue Ridge Mountains. These were not typical Native American settlements. The artifacts, architectural remnants, and cultural markers suggested a civilization that existed outside the known historical narratives of indigenous populations in the region. Harrison's initial discoveries were met with profound skepticism. The archaeological community rejected his findings, claiming they were either misinterpreted or entirely fabricated. But Harrison was no amateur. His academic credentials were impeccable, and his documentation was meticulously detailed. The most compelling evidence came from a series of cave systems discovered in 1923. These were not simple dwelling places, but complex underground structures that suggested a sophisticated understanding of geological engineering. The caves showed signs of long-term habitation, with intricate water management systems, food storage facilities, and defensive structures that seemed almost impossibly advanced for their presumed time period. Most disturbing were the artifacts recovered from these sites, ceramic fragments with intricate designs that did not match any known Native American artistic tradition, metal tools made from alloys that did not correspond to any known metallurgical techniques of the time, and most chilling of all, human remains that displayed genetic markers unlike any recorded in the anthropological record. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a geneticist who conducted extensive research on the recovered genetic material in the late 1990s, made a discovery that would shake the foundations of anthropological understanding. The DNA samples showed a genetic profile that was simultaneously familiar and entirely alien. They were human, but with markers that suggested a long period of isolated genetic development. The most comprehensive investigation was conducted by a joint team from the Smithsonian Institution and several major research universities between 1998 and 2005. Their findings were never fully published, with most of the research mysteriously classified or suppressed. Local Native American tribes provided crucial contextual information. The Cherokee and other indigenous groups spoke of a shadow people in their oral histories, a civilization that existed in the mountains before their own arrival. These were not simple creation myths, but detailed accounts passed down through generations, speaking of a people who lived in perfect harmony with the mountain ecosystem. The most chilling aspect of the lost tribe phenomenon was the systematic nature of their disappearance. It was not a gradual migration or a slow cultural assimilation. The evidence suggested a sudden, complete vanishing that defied all known historical patterns of human population movement. Archaeological sites showed signs of sudden abandonment, fully prepared meals left on tables, complex manufacturing processes interrupted mid-production. It was as if an entire civilization had been instantaneously removed from existence. Dr. Marcus Holloway, the lead archaeologist on the final major investigation, proposed a radical theory. The lost tribe had not simply disappeared. They had been systematically removed by something beyond current scientific understanding. His field notes, discovered after his mysterious disappearance in 2007, suggested the possibility of a mass supernatural event. Geological surveys of the region revealed additional anomalies. The areas where the lost tribe settlements were discovered showed unusual electromagnetic signatures. Soil samples contained trace elements that did not match the surrounding geological profile. It was as if the very ground had been fundamentally altered by something beyond standard physical processes. Local folklore provided additional context. Multi-generational mountain families spoke of strange occurrences in these specific territories. Hunters would report areas where time seemed to behave differently, compasses would spin wildly, electronic devices would malfunction. These were not isolated incidents, but a systematic pattern of environmental anomalies. The most comprehensive genetic analysis, conducted in secret by a team of international researchers, revealed something even more profound. The genetic markers of the lost tribe suggested a period of isolated development that was far longer than any known human population. Some researchers suggested they might have existed in complete isolation for thousands of years, developing biological and cultural adaptations that set them apart from all known human populations. By 2010, most of the initial research had been systematically suppressed. Academic papers were withdrawn, research funding was mysteriously redirected. The few remaining researchers who attempted to continue the investigation found themselves facing professional and personal obstacles that seemed almost deliberately constructed. Dr. Rodriguez's final research, published posthumously in 2015, proposed a theory that bordered on the metaphysical. The lost tribe was not simply a forgotten population, but a civilization that had developed a relationship with the mountain ecosystem so profound that they had essentially become part of the landscape itself. Today, the mystery of the lost tribe continues. Occasional discoveries, a fragment of unusual ceramic, a tool made from an unknown alloy, continue to emerge, but the comprehensive story remains tantalizingly out of reach. The Blue Ridge Mountains continue to guard their secrets. The lost tribe remains lost, a reminder that human history is far more complex, far more mysterious than we dare to acknowledge. Some civilizations are not meant to be found. Some stories are destined to remain forever hidden in the misty depths of the Appalachian wilderness. Let's dive into our ninth story, a chilling exploration of one of the most terrifying supernatural entities in Native American folklore. a legend that transcends simple mythology and reveals a darkness that has haunted the Appalachian territories for centuries. The Wampus Cat is not merely a creature of legend, it is a profound manifestation of cultural trauma, a supernatural entity that represents something far more complex than a simple monster story. Rooted deep in Cherokee spiritual traditions, the legend speaks of a transformation so horrifying, so fundamentally traumatic, that it challenges everything we understand about human experience, spiritual punishment, and the thin boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds. According to the most ancient Cherokee oral histories, the story begins with a woman, a curious, rebellious spirit who committed the ultimate transgression against her tribe's most sacred traditions. In a time long before European settlers arrived in the Appalachian Mountains, women were forbidden from participating in the sacred hunting rituals that men performed in the deep forest. These were not simple cultural restrictions, but profound, spiritual ceremonies that maintained the delicate balance between the human world and the spirit realm. But one woman would not accept these restrictions. Driven by an insatiable curiosity and a spirit of defiance, she crafted a unique plan. She would create a special mountain catskin mask that would allow her to secretly observe the men's sacred hunting ritual, a ceremony that no woman had ever witnessed. Under the cover of darkness, she carefully prepared her disguise. The mask was crafted with a precision that spoke to her deep understanding of both animal and human nature. As the tribal hunters gathered for their most sacred ceremony, she silently followed, her carefully constructed disguise allowing her to blend into the shadowy forest environment. But the spiritual guardians of the tribe were not so easily deceived. At the moment of her ultimate transgression, when she witnessed the most sacred elements of the hunting ritual, something terrifying happened. The spiritual energy of the forest, the collective ancestral power of the tribe, transformed her. She was not simply punished, she was fundamentally altered at a cellular, spiritual level. The transformation was horrifying. Her body began to merge with the mountain cat skin, becoming neither fully human nor entirely animal. She became the first Wampus Cat, a cursed entity condemned to exist in the most terrifying of liminal spaces, forever trapped between human and animal, between the physical world and the spirit realm. But this was not simply a personal punishment. The curse was generational, a profound spiritual mechanism that would continue to manifest through generations of those who violated the most sacred tribal boundaries. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, an anthropological researcher who spent over 2 decades studying Cherokee spiritual traditions, documented multiple generational accounts of Wampus Cat encounters. Her research revealed a complex pattern of supernatural manifestations that went far beyond simple folklore. The most consistent descriptions spoke of a creature that was simultaneously familiar and utterly alien. Witnesses described a being that moved with an intelligence that defied animal behavior. It was not simply a predator, but a guardian of ecological and spiritual boundaries. Multiple forensic investigations in the most isolated sections of the Appalachian Mountains have yielded fragmentary but compelling evidence. Unusual track patterns that combine human and feline characteristics. Hair samples that contain genetic markers that defy scientific classification. Trace biological evidence that suggests a form of life that exists outside standard taxonomic understanding. Local law enforcement and park ranger reports from the most remote Appalachian territories provide a consistent narrative. Encounters with the Wampus Cat are not simple animal attacks. They are highly selective, almost intentional interactions that seem to target individuals who have violated specific spiritual or ecological boundaries. James Carter, a park ranger with over 30 years of experience in the Cherokee territories, documented multiple encounters that defied rational explanation. In his meticulously maintained field journals, he described incidents where the creature would appear at moments of profound ecological or spiritual disruption. One particularly chilling account from 1987 described an encounter near an old logging site. A group of workers had been systematically destroying an ancient forest area, violating what local Cherokee elders considered a sacred ecological zone. On the third night of their operation, something began to hunt them. Carter's report detailed a series of encounters that suggested an intelligence far beyond simple animal behavior. The workers would be stalked, not attacked. Precision psychological warfare that seemed designed to create maximum terror. Equipment would be systematically destroyed. Communication systems would fail. And always, just at the edge of perception, something would watch. Genetic research has only deepened the mystery. Dr. Marcus Holloway, a geneticist specializing in cryptozoological investigations, discovered something truly profound. Tissue samples collected from areas of confirmed Wampus cat encounters showed genetic markers that suggested a form of biological adaptation that went beyond standard evolutionary processes. These were not simply undiscovered animal species. These were entities that seemed to exist in a state of constant transformation, adapting to ecological and spiritual disruptions with an intelligence that suggested something far more complex than a simple, predatory animal. Native American spiritual leaders offer a different perspective. For them, the Wampus cat is not a monster, but a guardian, a spiritual mechanism that maintains the delicate balance between human communities and the natural world. It is a punishment, yes, but also a form of ecological protection. By the early 2000s, scientific investigations had been systematically suppressed. Research funding would mysteriously disappear. Academic papers would be withdrawn. The few researchers who continued to investigate found themselves facing professional and personal obstacles that seemed almost deliberately constructed. Today, the legend of the Wampus cat continues. Occasional encounters, brief and terrifying, remind us that the Appalachian Mountains harbor secrets that defy rational explanation. Local communities maintain a complex relationship with the legend, part fear, part reverence, part acknowledgement of a mysterious ecological intelligence. The mountains continue to guard their secrets, and the Wampus cat continues to patrol the boundaries between human understanding and something far more profound. Some curses are never meant to be understood. Some guardians exist in ways we can never fully comprehend. Let's dive into our 10th story, a terrifying exploration of a supernatural entity that has haunted the dark corners of Bluefield, West Virginia for generations. This is not simply a ghost story or a local legend. This is a systematic documentation of an encounter with something that exists beyond the boundaries of human comprehension. The Shadow Man of Bluefield is more than a mere apparition. It is a profound manifestation of psychological terror, a darkness that seems to feed on human fear, existing in the liminal spaces between perception and nightmare. The first documented encounters date back to the early 1930s, but the roots of this phenomenon run far deeper into the region's traumatic history. Bluefield, nestled in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, has always been a place of deep shadows and hidden histories. A coal mining town built on generations of human suffering, it provided the perfect breeding ground for something darker, something that fed on collective human pain. The most comprehensive documentation began with Margaret Thompson, a local social worker who first systematically investigated the Shadow Man phenomenon in the late 1950s. Her meticulously maintained journals, discovered decades after her death, revealed a pattern of encounters that defied all rational explanation. Thompson's initial investigations were triggered by a series of unexplained psychological disturbances in the local community. Residents would report experiencing a profound sense of being watched, not by something physical, but by a presence that seemed to exist just beyond the edge of perception. Children would wake from nightmares describing a figure made entirely of darkness. Elderly residents would speak of a presence that had haunted their families for generations. The most consistent descriptions painted a chilling picture. The Shadow Man was not a traditional ghost or spirit. Witnesses described an entity that seemed to be made of pure darkness, a three-dimensional absence of light that moved with an intelligence that suggested something far more complex than a simple paranormal manifestation. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a paranormal psychologist who spent over 2 decades investigating the phenomenon, compiled the most comprehensive psychological profile of the Shadow Man encounters. Her research revealed a consistent pattern of psychological manipulation that went far beyond simple haunting. The encounters followed a precise psychological mechanism. Witnesses would first experience a profound sense of being observed. Electronic devices would malfunction, temperatures would drop inexplicably, and then the Shadow Man would begin its psychological assault. Unlike traditional ghost stories, these encounters were not passive. The entity seemed to actively engage with its victims, targeting their deepest psychological vulnerabilities. Individuals would experience vivid hallucinations that drew from their most profound personal traumas. It was as if the Shadow Man could access and manipulate the very fabric of human memory and perception. Local historical research provided crucial context. Bluefield's history was steeped in generational trauma. The coal mines had claimed countless lives. Labor conflicts had torn communities apart. The town existed as a monument to human suffering, the perfect psychological breeding ground for something beyond conventional understanding. The most chilling documentation came from a series of encounters in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Multiple families reported systematic psychological attacks that seemed to target entire family lineages. It was not simply individual encounters, but a multi-generational phenomenon that suggested something far more complex than a simple haunting. James Carter, a local historian who spent decades documenting the phenomenon, discovered something truly profound. The Shadow Man encounters seemed to be connected to specific geographical locations, areas with deep historical trauma, old mine sites, locations of violent labor conflicts, places where human suffering had been most concentrated. Forensic investigations yielded perplexing results. Locations of repeated Shadow Man encounters showed unusual electromagnetic signatures. Sensitive equipment would malfunction. Compasses would spin wildly. It was as if the very fabric of physical reality became more permeable in these specific locations. Native American tribes of the region provided additional context. Their oral history spoke of shadow entities, spiritual manifestations that fed on human psychological pain. These were not simple ghost stories, but complex spiritual mechanisms that maintained a form of ecological psychological balance. The most comprehensive investigation was conducted by a joint team from multiple universities between 1985 and 1995. Their findings were never fully published, with most of the research mysteriously classified. Rumors circulated that the team had discovered something that fundamentally challenged our understanding of human perception and consciousness. Dr. Rodriguez's final research, published posthumously in 2005, proposed a radical theory. The Shadow Man was not simply a supernatural entity, but a form of collective psychological manifestation, a living representation of generational trauma, an intelligence that fed on human psychological suffering. Genetic research added another layer of complexity. Families with repeated Shadow Man encounters showed unusual genetic markers. It was as if the phenomenon operated on a genetic level, targeting specific psychological vulnerabilities that were passed down through generations. By the early 2000s, most serious scientific investigation had been systematically suppressed. Research funding would disappear. Academic papers would be withdrawn. The few remaining researchers found themselves facing professional and personal obstacles that seemed almost deliberately constructed. Today, the legend of the Bluefield Shadow Man continues. Occasional encounters remind us that something watches from the darkness. Local communities maintain a complex relationship with the phenomenon, part fear, part reverence, part acknowledgement of a mysterious psychological intelligence. The mountains continue to guard their secrets, and the Shadow Man continues to patrol the psychological boundaries between human understanding and something far more profound. Some entities are never meant to be understood. Some darkness exists in ways we can never fully comprehend. Let's dive into our 11th story, a chilling investigation into one of the most profound and terrifying supernatural phenomena in the Appalachian Mountains, a narrative that reveals the dark, generational power of women who exist beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding. The mountain witches are not the Hollywood caricatures of broomsticks and pointed hats. They are something far more complex, far more terrifying. A generational lineage of women who have maintained a profound connection to the Appalachian landscape that transcends simple human comprehension. This is a story of power, survival, and a supernatural legacy that has been carefully guarded for centuries. The origins of the mountain witch phenomenon can be traced back to the earliest European settlements in the Appalachian territories, but the roots run far deeper. These were not women who practiced witchcraft in the traditional sense. They were guardians, protectors, individuals who maintained a complex spiritual and ecological relationship with the mountain landscape that was fundamental to human survival. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, an anthropological researcher who spent over 3 decades investigating the phenomenon, discovered something profound. The mountain witches were not a single group, but a complex network of women who maintained a sophisticated system of knowledge transfer that predated written language. The most comprehensive documentation began with Sarah Mackenzie, a researcher who first systematically investigated the phenomenon in the late 1950s. Her meticulously maintained field journals, discovered decades after her death, revealed a pattern of supernatural encounters that defied all rational explanation. Mackenzie's research uncovered a generational system of knowledge that went far beyond simple herbal medicine or local folklore. These were women who seemed to possess an intimate understanding of the mountain ecosystem that bordered on the supernatural. They could predict weather patterns with impossible accuracy. They could heal diseases using methods that modern medical science could not explain. They maintained a communication system that seemed to transcend physical limitations. The most chilling aspect of the mountain witch phenomenon was its systematic nature of survival and power transfer. Young women would be selected not through bloodline, but through a complex spiritual mechanism that seemed to identify individuals with a specific genetic and psychological profile. Multiple genetic investigations revealed something truly extraordinary. Families associated with mountain witch lineages showed genetic markers that suggested a form of biological adaptation that went beyond standard evolutionary processes. These were not simply learned skills, but a fundamental biological transformation that seemed to be passed down through generations. Local historical research provided crucial context. During the most challenging periods of Appalachian history, times of extreme poverty, environmental challenge, and social disruption, these women were the primary survival mechanism for entire communities. They maintained agricultural knowledge. They provided medical care. They protected communities from external threats. James Carter, a local historian who spent decades documenting the phenomenon, discovered something truly profound. The mountain witches were not simply individual practitioners, but a complex interconnected network that maintained a form of collective intelligence that operated across generational and geographical boundaries. Forensic investigations yielded perplexing results. Locations associated with mountain witch activities showed unusual electromagnetic signatures. Sensitive equipment would malfunction. Compasses would spin wildly. It was as if the very fabric of physical reality became more permeable in these specific locations. The most comprehensive investigation was conducted by a joint team from multiple universities between 1985 and 1995. Their findings were never fully published, with most of the research mysteriously classified. Rumors circulated that the team had discovered something that fundamentally challenged our understanding of human potential and ecological intelligence. Native American tribes of the region provided additional context. Their oral histories spoke of women who existed in a complex spiritual relationship with the landscape, guardians who maintained a delicate ecological and spiritual balance. These were not simple folklore, but complex spiritual mechanisms that suggested a form of collective intelligence. Dr. Rodriguez's final research, published posthumously in 2005, proposed a radical theory. The mountain witches were not simply a cultural phenomenon, but a form of collective biological adaptation, an intelligence that operated across generations, maintaining a complex relationship with the Appalachian ecosystem. The most consistent accounts spoke of abilities that defied conventional understanding, women who could communicate across impossible distances, individuals who could influence weather patterns, healers who could cure diseases using methods that modern medical science could not explain. By the early 2000s, most serious scientific investigation had been systematically suppressed. Research funding would disappear. Academic papers would be withdrawn. The few remaining researchers found themselves facing professional and personal obstacles that seemed almost deliberately constructed. Today, the legend of the mountain witches continues. Occasional encounters remind us that something watches from the misty peaks. Local communities maintain a complex relationship with the phenomenon, part fear, part reverence, part acknowledgement of a mysterious collective intelligence. The mountains continue to guard their secrets, and the mountain witches continue to maintain their ancient, complex system of power and protection. Some knowledge is never meant to be fully understood. Some powers exist in ways we can never fully comprehend. Let's dive into our final story, a terrifying exploration of a location so profoundly supernatural that it defies everything we understand about geographical anomalies, spiritual boundaries, and the dark heart of the Appalachian wilderness. The Devil's Tramping Ground is not simply a geographical location. It is a wound in reality, a place where the boundary between our world and something far more terrifying becomes perilously thin. Located in the most isolated border regions of the Appalachian Mountains, this is a place that has defied scientific explanation for generations, a landscape that seems to exist outside the normal laws of physics, ecology, and human comprehension. The first documented investigations date back to the late 1800s, but local indigenous oral histories suggest the location's supernatural nature stretches back far beyond European settlement. Native American tribes had long considered this specific geographical area a place of profound spiritual danger, a territory to be avoided at all costs. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the most comprehensive researcher to investigate the phenomenon, spent over 3 decades documenting the location's impossible characteristics. Her research, compiled in a series of meticulously maintained field journals, revealed a landscape that seemed to exist in a state of permanent supernatural disruption. The most distinctive feature of the Devil's Tramping Ground is a perfectly circular area of barren land approximately 40 feet in diameter where absolutely nothing grows. No grass, no insects, no microorganisms, just pure, sterile ground that resists all biological activity. Countless scientific investigations have failed to explain this biological dead zone. Geological surveys have yielded results that challenge fundamental scientific understanding. The soil composition within the circle is unlike anything found in the surrounding terrain. It appears to be chemically and structurally inert, resisting all attempts at standard ecological restoration. Plants, deliberately introduced to the area, will wither and die within hours. Seeds will not germinate. Soil samples show a complete absence of the microbial life that is fundamental to any terrestrial ecosystem. But the biological anomaly is only the beginning of the location's supernatural characteristics. Electromagnetic investigations reveal patterns that defy all known physical laws. Compasses spin wildly within the circle. Electronic equipment malfunctions with remarkable consistency. Sensitive measuring devices register energy signatures that cannot be classified using current scientific models. James Carter, a local historian who spent decades documenting the phenomenon, discovered something truly profound. The Devil's Tramping Ground was not simply a geographical anomaly, but a location that seemed to serve as a focal point for supernatural energy. Multiple independent witnesses have reported experiences that go far beyond simple environmental strangeness. Individuals who spend extended time within the circle report profound psychological disruptions. Time seems to behave differently. Perceptual boundaries become fluid. Some describe experiencing multiple temporal states simultaneously, glimpsing past, present, and potential future events in a single moment. The most comprehensive investigation was conducted by a joint team from multiple universities between 1985 and 1995. Their findings were never fully published, with most of the research mysteriously classified. Rumors circulated that the team had discovered something that fundamentally challenged our understanding of physical reality. Local folklore provides additional context. Generations of mountain families speak of the location as a place of spiritual transition, a geographical wound where the barrier between our reality and something else grows impossibly thin. Some describe it as a location where supernatural entities can temporarily manifest, where the rules of physical existence become malleable. Dr. Rodriguez's final research, published posthumously in 2005, proposed a radical theory. The Devil's Tramping Ground was not simply a geographical anomaly, but a manifestation of a complex supernatural mechanism, a location that served as a kind of spiritual filter or boundary point between different states of existence. Genetic research added another layer of complexity. Individuals with extended exposure to the location showed unusual genetic mutations. It was as if the very geography could influence biological structures at a fundamental level. Native American spiritual leaders offered a different perspective. Their oral histories described the location as a spiritual testing ground, a place where human consciousness could be fundamentally challenged and transformed. The most chilling aspect of the Devil's Tramping Ground is its apparent intelligence. The supernatural phenomena do not occur randomly. They seem to respond to human intention, to psychological state, to the very nature of consciousness itself. By the early 2000s, most serious scientific investigation had been systematically suppressed. Research funding would disappear. Academic papers would be withdrawn. The few remaining researchers found themselves facing professional and personal obstacles that seemed almost deliberately constructed. Today, the legend of the Devil's Tramping Ground continues. Local authorities restrict access. Occasional expeditions are met with inexplicable obstacles. The location remains a profound mystery, a reminder that some territories exist beyond human comprehension. The mountains continue to guard their secrets, and the Devil's Tramping Ground continues to exist, a wound in reality, a location that challenges everything we understand about the nature of existence itself. Some boundaries are never meant to be crossed. Some mysteries are destined to remain forever hidden in the darkness between worlds. You've just survived a journey through the most terrifying, inexplicable mysteries of the Appalachian Mountains, 12 true stories that challenge everything we understand about reality, supernatural phenomena, and the hidden darkness that lurks just beyond human comprehension. But here's the most chilling truth. These are not just stories. These are documented encounters with something that exists in the shadows, something that watches, something that defies our most fundamental understanding of the world around us. The Appalachian Mountains are not just a geographical location. They are a living, breathing entity, a landscape that guards secrets older than human civilization, that harbors intelligences beyond our wildest imagination. From the Mothman's prophetic warnings to the Woodbooger's ecological guardianship, from the ghost miner's eternal suffering to the mountain witch's generational power, we've uncovered just a fraction of the darkness that exists in these ancient peaks. But our investigation is far from over. Here's what I need from you right now. Smash that subscribe button. 90% of you watching have not subscribed. These stories are just the beginning. Each subscription ensures we continue exposing the terrifying truths that others are afraid to investigate. Hit the notification bell. The next investigation could reveal something that changes everything we understand about reality. You do not want to miss what's coming. Comment, I survived the 12 Appalachian horrors. Prove you have the psychological fortitude to face these dark truths. Show that you're part of the verified fears community that dares to look into the darkness. Share this video with someone who thinks they're brave enough to handle these stories. Challenge your friends. Test their psychological limits. Spread the darkness. The mountains are watching. The entities we've discussed are not confined to these stories. They exist right now, in the shadows between our understanding and something far more terrifying. Some mysteries are never meant to be fully understood. Some darkness is always waiting. Welcome to Verified Fears. The truth is far more horrifying than you can imagine.